August 16, 1977, 4:23 a.m. Red West stares at his ringing phone, Elvis Presley's name flashing on the caller ID for the 17th time that night. His finger hovers over the answer button. One decision, pick up or let it ring, will determine whether the king of rock and roll lives or dies in the next 30 minutes. He lets it ring. What Red doesn't know is that Elvis is recording a message. A 47-second confession that will remain buried for 40 years. A message so devastating that when Red finally hears it, he'll write in his deathbed letter, "I didn't just lose my best friend that night, I killed him." But that's not even the most shocking part. Because 3 hours earlier, Elvis had made a different kind of call, to someone the world would never suspect. Someone who could have changed everything with just 2 words, "Come home." The problem is that person was 8 years old. Lisa Marie Presley spent her entire adult life haunted by a single question. Could her father still be alive if she'd just knocked on his bedroom door? What she didn't know, what nobody knew until the phone records were digitized in 2024, was that Elvis tried to call her room that night too. At 4:31 a.m., 8 minutes before he died. The message he left on her children's answering machine wasn't discovered until 1982. Everyone assumed it was old. Nobody thought to check the timestamp. Until now. See, the official story of Elvis's death is that he died alone, abandoned by everyone who claimed to love him. The truth is far more heartbreaking. Elvis spent his final hours desperately trying to come home to the people who mattered most, the people he'd pushed away, the people who were too proud, too hurt, too young to answer. What you're about to hear comes from unsealed police interviews, private family recordings, and confessions that 3 families kept secret for decades. This isn't just about how Elvis died. It's about 3 decisions made in anger, pride, and fear that destroyed the most famous man in the world. By the end of this story, you'll understand why Red West carried a recording in his safe deposit box for 40 years with a note that read, "Only to be opened after my death, the world must never know what I did." You'll understand why Lisa Marie Presley's final letter, found after her death in 2023, contained a confession that will break your heart. And you'll understand why sometimes the people we love most are the ones we're least capable of saving. To understand what happened on August 16th, we have to go back exactly 13 months earlier, to the night Elvis made a decision that would seal his fate. July 13th, 1976, Graceland, 3 a.m. Red West had been Elvis's bodyguard, friend, and brother for over 20 years. Since they were teenagers in Memphis, Red had been the one Elvis called when the world got too heavy. Along with his cousin Sonny West and fellow bodyguard Dave Hebler, they formed Elvis's inner circle, his shield against a world that wanted to consume him. They called themselves the Memphis Mafia, but by 1976 they weren't protecting Elvis from the world anymore. They were protecting him from himself. Elvis was consuming an average of 10,000 pills per year, Demerol for the pain, codeine for his back, Quaaludes to sleep, Seconal to wake up, Dilaudid when the others stopped working. Red West kept a notebook tracking every single pill that went into Elvis's body. When police finally saw that notebook during their investigation, one detective had to leave the room to vomit. But here's what never made it into any official report. Red, Sonny, and Dave had been secretly switching out Elvis's pills for months, replacing the strongest medications with placebos, diluting doses, even stealing pills from his private stash when they thought he wasn't looking. They weren't dealers, they weren't enablers. They were 3 men watching their best friend die in slow motion, doing the only thing they could think of to save him. Elvis figured it out. The confrontation started over something stupid, a missed cue during rehearsal for an upcoming tour. Elvis had stumbled through "Love Me Tender," forgot the words to "Don't Be Cruel." The pills he'd taken an hour earlier should have sharpened his focus. Instead, he felt nothing. That's when he knew. "How long?" Elvis asked Red as they stood alone in the music room at Graceland. His voice was quiet, but there was something dangerous underneath it, something Red had never heard before. "How long what is? How long have you been lying to me?" Red's silence was answer enough. What happened next would echo through the halls of Graceland for the rest of Elvis's life. 8-year-old Lisa Marie heard the screaming from her bedroom down the hall. She later told friends it was the most terrifying sound she'd ever heard, worse than the night her parents divorced, worse than any nightmare. "You've been treating me like I'm some kind of animal," Elvis screamed at Red, his voice raw and breaking. "Like I can't take care of myself, like I'm not a man." Red tried to explain, tried to tell Elvis they were worried about him, that the pills were killing him, that they'd rather have Elvis hate them than lose him forever. He talked about finding Elvis unconscious on his bathroom floor 6 months earlier, blue-faced and barely breathing. About having to carry the king of rock and roll to his bed like a child. Elvis's response would haunt Red West until his dying day. "You want to control me, you think you know what's best for me, then you're not my friend anymore, you're my employee. And I fire employees who steal from me." But Elvis didn't just fire them. What he did next was so calculated, so deliberately cruel, that it broke a brotherhood that had survived 2 decades of fame, money, and madness. He called a press conference. On July 14, 1976, less than 24 hours after their confrontation, Elvis stood in front of reporters at Graceland and announced that Red West, Sonny West, and Dave Hebler had been terminated for disloyalty and drug-related theft. Every word was a lie designed to wound. He claimed they had been selling stories about him to tabloids, that they had been photographing him in private moments to make money, that they had betrayed the trust of not just me, but my daughter and my family. Red West sat in his small apartment that night, watching the man he'd protected with his life destroy him on television. His wife was crying. His phone was ringing off the hook with reporters wanting comment. His 20-year career as Elvis's guardian was over, and everyone in America thought he was a thief. That's when Red made a decision that would change everything. He picked up the phone and called Steve Dunleavy, a reporter who'd been begging for inside stories about Elvis for years. "I want to write a book," Red told him. "I want to tell the truth about Elvis Presley." The conversation lasted 3 hours. By the time Red hung up, the machinery was in motion for the most devastating tell-all in entertainment history. But here's what Red West never admitted, not even in his deathbed confession. He didn't write that book to save Elvis. He wrote it to hurt him. The same way Elvis had hurt him, the same way Elvis had humiliated him in front of the world. Red West wanted Elvis to feel what betrayal actually looked like. Elvis, What Happened was published on August 1, 1977. 15 days before Elvis died. The book revealed everything Red, Sonny, and Dave knew about Elvis's private life. The pills, the paranoia, the guns. Stories about Elvis shooting at television sets when he didn't like what was on. About him pulling a gun on a fan who asked for an autograph. About the night he almost overdosed and had to be revived with adrenaline injected directly into his heart. But the most devastating chapter was the one Red West wrote alone, late at night, tears streaming down his face as he typed. It was called The Man We Used to Know. In it, Red described finding Elvis unconscious on his bathroom floor in 1975, face blue, pulse barely detectable. He wrote about carrying Elvis to bed, about watching the man who had been his hero, his brother, his purpose, turn into someone he barely recognized. Someone who trusted no one, feared everyone, and was slowly disappearing into a pharmaceutical fog that no amount of friendship could penetrate. "We didn't write this book to hurt Elvis," Red told reporters when it was published. "We wrote it to save him." It was a half-true. Elvis read the book on August 15, 1977, the night before he died. Ginger Alden, his girlfriend, found him at 2 a.m. sitting on the edge of his bed in his pajamas, holding the book in his hands, tears streaming down his face. "They really think I'm dying," Elvis whispered to her. "They really think I'm going to die." Ginger asked him if he was going to call them, if he was going to try to make things right with the 3 men who knew him better than anyone else in the world. Elvis looked at her with eyes that seemed impossibly old for a 42-year-old man. "It's too late for that now," he said. But it wasn't too late, not yet. Because what no one knew until the police interviews were unsealed decades later was that Elvis did try to call Red West that night. Not once, not twice. 17 times. The first call came at 11:47 p.m., the last one at 4:23 a.m. Red West's phone rang 17 times that night, and 17 times he chose not to answer. The 18th call never came. Because by then, Elvis Presley was dead. Red West's phone started ringing at 11:47 p.m. on August 15, 1977, but that wasn't the first call that night that would change everything. 3 hours earlier at 8:30 p.m., Elvis had received a call that made him realize he was completely alone in the world. The caller was Colonel Parker, his manager, and the conversation lasted exactly 43 seconds. When Elvis hung up, he threw the phone across his bedroom so hard it shattered against the wall. What Colonel Parker told him in those 43 seconds would drive Elvis to make 17 desperate phone calls to the one man who might still care enough to save him. Elvis, What Happened had been on shelves for exactly 2 weeks. In that time, it had become the fastest-selling celebrity tell-all in publishing history. More than that, it had become a cultural phenomenon. Talk shows were dissecting every chapter. Newspapers were running excerpts. The book that Red West wrote to hurt Elvis wasn't just hurting him. It was destroying him. Colonel Parker's call was brief and brutal. The Vegas shows are canceled. The sponsors won't touch you. The insurance company won't cover you. As of tonight, you're unemployable. Elvis Presley, the man who had sold over 1 billion records, who had packed stadiums for 2 decades, who was still selling out every show in Las Vegas, was suddenly too toxic to insure. All because his former bodyguards had told the truth. But here's what Colonel Parker didn't tell Elvis, what wouldn't come out until the lawsuits were settled years later. Parker had been shopping around his own tell-all book for months. A book that would make Red West's revelations look like a love letter. Parker was planning to abandon Elvis anyway. The bodyguards just gave him the perfect excuse. Elvis realized this as he sat alone in Graceland that night, surrounded by the wreckage of his phone and the pieces of his career. Everyone he'd ever trusted was writing books about him. Everyone he'd ever loved was cashing in on his pain. That's when he started making calls. The first call at 11:47 p.m. went to Red West's answering machine. Elvis's voice was shaky but controlled. "Red, it's me. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to explain some things. About the pills, about what I said at that press conference. I was wrong, Red. I was scared and I was wrong." Red West was home. He heard every word. His wife begged him to pick up. He didn't. The second call came at 12:23 a.m. This time Elvis sounded more desperate. "I read your book, Red. I read the whole thing tonight. You're right about me. You're right about everything. I am dying and I don't know how to stop." Again, Red West let it ring. By the third call at 12:58 a.m., Elvis was crying. "Please, Red, I can't do this alone anymore. I need help. I need my friend back." Red West's wife was crying too by then. "Answer the phone," she kept saying. "He needs you." But Red was carrying too much anger, too much hurt pride. "He humiliated me in front of the world," he told her. "He called me a thief on national television. Let him figure it out himself." The fourth call, the fifth, and the sixth. Each message more desperate than the last. Elvis talked about reading the chapter called "The Man We Used to Know." How it made him realize he didn't recognize himself anymore either. How he'd become someone he never wanted to be. In the seventh call at 2:15 a.m., Elvis said something that would haunt Red West forever. "You wrote that you don't know me anymore. The truth is I don't know me anymore either. I look in the mirror and I see someone I hate, someone weak, someone pathetic." By the eighth call, Elvis was talking about Lisa Marie. "She asked me yesterday if I was sick. 8 years old, Red, and she can see what everyone else pretends not to notice. What kind of father am I? What kind of man?" The ninth call was barely coherent. Elvis had taken something dilated, probably, based on the slurred words and long pauses between thoughts. "I keep thinking about that night in '64 when we drove to Memphis just to get barbecue. Remember, we stayed up all night talking about girls and music and how we were going to conquer the world." Red West remembered. It was one of his favorite memories. "We were so young then," Elvis continued in that drugged, distant voice. "We thought we'd be friends forever. We thought nothing could come between us." The 10th call broke Red West's heart, though he'd never admit it until his deathbed confession 40 years later. "I'm sorry I called you a thief, Red. You never stole anything from me except pills that were killing me. You were trying to save my life and I was too proud to see it. Too scared to admit I needed saving." Red West's hand moved toward the phone. For just a moment he almost answered. But then he thought about the press conference, the lies Elvis had told about him, the way reporters had hounded his family for weeks. His hand stopped. The 11th call was different. Elvis's voice was steadier, like he'd made some kind of decision. "I called Sonny and Dave too. They won't answer either. I guess I can't blame any of you. I destroyed everything good in my life because I was too scared to admit I was weak." The 12th call came at 3:47 a.m. "I keep thinking about what you wrote in that book, about finding me on the bathroom floor that night, about how you had to carry me to bed. You must have felt like you were carrying a corpse." Red West had felt exactly like that. "Maybe you were," Elvis continued. "Maybe I've been dead for a while now and just too stubborn to lie down." The 13th call was barely a whisper. "I don't want to die, Red. I don't want to die alone." The 14th call, "Do you think there's any way back from this? Do you think I could get clean? Do you think people would forgive me?" The 15th call, "I'm scared, Red. I'm so goddamn scared." The 16th call was the longest one. Elvis talked for almost 3 minutes about their friendship, about all the good times they'd shared, about how sorry he was for everything that had gone wrong. He talked about wanting to be a better father, a better man, a better friend. "If I could take back everything I said about you, I would," Elvis said. "If I could take back that press conference, I would. If I could take back the last year and handle everything differently, I would. But I can't, Red. All I can do is tell you I'm sorry and ask for help." There was a long pause. Then, "I love you, brother. I never stopped loving you even when I was trying to hurt you. I hope you know that." Red West was crying by then, so was his wife. But pride is a powerful drug, and Red West had been overdosing on it for 13 months. He didn't answer. The 17th and final call came at 4:23 a.m. It went to voicemail because Red had finally taken the phone off the hook. He couldn't bear to hear Elvis's voice anymore. But Elvis left a message anyway, a 47-second recording that would remain hidden for 40 years. A message so devastating that when Red West finally heard it, he would know beyond any doubt that pride had made him a killer. What Elvis said in those 47 seconds changed everything Red thought he knew about that night. Because Elvis wasn't just calling to apologize. He was calling to say goodbye. The 47-second voicemail that Elvis left at 4:23 a.m. wasn't just a goodbye message. It was a confession that would have changed everything if anyone had heard it in time. But Red West didn't check his messages until 6:15 a.m., 30 minutes after paramedics had already pronounced Elvis dead. By then, the confession was just evidence of what might have been. What Elvis said in those 47 seconds would torment Red West for 40 years, but it wasn't the words themselves that destroyed him. It was what Elvis revealed about the pills he'd taken that night and where he'd gotten them. Red, Elvis's voice began on that final recording, slurred but determined. "I know you hate me. I know you think I'm dying. Maybe you're right. I can't. I can't do this anymore, man. I'm so tired. I'm so damn tired." There's a long pause. You can hear Elvis crying. "I'm sorry about what I said at that press conference. I'm sorry I called you a thief. You were trying to help me and I was too scared, too proud to see it. I couldn't admit that I needed saving." Another pause, longer this time. "I need to tell you something, Red, about tonight, about what I took." Elvis's voice gets steadier, like he's forcing himself to be clear. "I found your stash, the one you hid in the music room back in '75, the pills you took from me when you thought I was going to overdose." Red West would later tell investigators that hearing this nearly stopped his heart. He'd forgotten about those pills, dozens of Diladids and Seconals he'd confiscated from Elvis over a year earlier and hidden, planning to throw them away but never getting around to it. "They're still strong, Red. After all this time, they're still so damn strong. I took 6 of them an hour ago and I can barely feel my heartbeat." Elvis had overdosed on the very pills Red West had hidden to save his life. "I keep thinking," Elvis continued in that fatting voice, "about what you wrote in your book, about how you had to carry me to bed that night, about how I looked like a corpse. Maybe I was already dead then, Red. Maybe I've been dying for 2 years and just too stubborn to stop breathing." The recording crackles. Elvis's voice is getting weaker. "I want you to know something, brother. I forgive you for the book. I understand why you wrote it. You were trying to wake me up, trying to make me see what I'd become. I was too far gone to listen." There's the sound of something falling, maybe the phone, maybe Elvis himself. "I'm scared, Red. I don't want to die alone, but I think it's too late now. The pills. There were too many pills." A whispered pause. "Tell Lisa Marie I love her. Tell her daddy tried to come home." The line goes dead. Red West listened to that message 6 times in a row, sitting in his kitchen as the sun rose over Memphis, knowing that if he'd answered any of those 17 calls, Elvis would still be alive. But that wasn't the end of the story. Because what Red didn't know until the police investigation was that Elvis had made one more call that night. At 4:31 a.m., 8 minutes after leaving the message for Red, 3 minutes before he collapsed in his bathroom, Elvis had dialed one more number. His daughter's room. Lisa Marie had a children's phone in her bedroom, a birthday gift she'd gotten when she turned 8. It had its own answering machine, decorated with cartoon characters, where friends could leave messages about sleepovers and school projects. Elvis called that number at 4:31 a.m. The call went to the machine because Lisa Marie was fast asleep, exhausted from a nightmare she'd had earlier that night. A nightmare about her daddy calling for help while no one could hear him. The message Elvis left on his 8-year-old daughter's answering machine was 12 seconds long. "Daddy loves you, baby girl. Daddy loves you so much. Sweet dreams." Those were Elvis Presley's last words. Not to his manager, not to his girlfriend, not to his bodyguards or his fans. To his little girl. The message wasn't discovered until 1982, 5 years after Elvis's death, when they were cleaning out Lisa Marie's old room to redecorate. The housekeeper found the little answering machine in a closet and played back old messages, thinking they might want to save them. When she heard Elvis's voice, she called Priscilla immediately. But here's the part that would haunt the Presley family for decades. Everyone assumed the message was from weeks or months before Elvis died. It sounded like dozens of other goodnight messages he'd left for Lisa Marie over the years. Nobody thought to check the timestamp. Not until 2024, when Graceland's phone records were finally digitized as part of a documentary project. That's when they discovered the truth. Elvis's final call wasn't to Red West. It was to the person he loved most in the world. But there's one more piece to this story that makes it even more heartbreaking. Lisa Marie had been awake that night. She'd woken up at 4 a.m. from her nightmare about her daddy calling for help. She'd gotten out of bed and walked toward Elvis's room to check on him, just like she did when she had bad dreams. But when she got to his door, she heard him talking on the phone. "Please answer," she heard him say through the door. "Please just answer the phone." 8-year-old Lisa Marie thought her daddy was talking to her mommy, to Priscilla, who lived in California. She thought it was a private grown-up conversation, so she went back to her room. She never knew that 8 minutes later, her daddy would call her. She never knew that if she'd just knocked on his door, if she'd just said, "Daddy, I love you," through that wooden barrier, it might have been enough to keep him alive until morning. Until help could come. Until someone could answer. Lisa Marie Presley carried that guilt for 46 years. But she wasn't the only one carrying a secret from that night. Because there was someone else awake in Graceland at 4:31 a.m. Someone who heard Elvis make that final call to Lisa Marie's room. Someone who could have saved him but chose to stay silent. And that person's identity would remain hidden until a deathbed confession in 2023 that would change everything we thought we knew about Elvis's final moments. The person who heard Elvis make that final call to Lisa Marie's room was standing in the hallway outside his bedroom door at 4:31 a.m. She'd been there for over an hour, listening to him cry, listening to him call Red West 17 times, listening to him slowly die. And she never said a word. Her name was Mary Jenkins, and she'd been Elvis's housekeeper at Graceland for 12 years. But on the night Elvis died, she wasn't just the help. She was the only witness to the most tragic miscommunication in music history. Mary's deathbed confession, recorded by her granddaughter in January 2023, revealed a secret that had tortured her for 46 years. She'd been awake that night because Elvis had asked her to stay. Not to clean, not to cook, to watch. Mr. Elvis knew he was in trouble, Mary said in that final recording, her voice barely a whisper. He called me into his room around midnight and said, "Mary, I think I might have taken too much tonight. I need you to check on me every hour. If something happens, call the doctor." Mary had been checking on Elvis every hour since midnight. At 1 a.m., she found him packing his bedroom, talking to himself. At 2 a.m., he was sitting on his bed, staring at Red West's book. At 3 a.m., he was making phone calls. At 4 a.m., she heard him collapse. "I was standing outside his door when I heard this thud," Mary recalled. "Like something heavy hitting the floor. I pushed the door open just a crack and saw Mr. Elvis on his knees beside his bed, trying to reach for the phone." Mary Jenkins had two choices in that moment: rush in and help him, or respect his privacy and wait to see if he recovered on his own. She chose privacy. "He was such a private man," Mary explained in her confession. "He hated people seeing him weak. I thought he was just dizzy from the pills. I thought he'd get back up." But Elvis didn't get back up, not completely. Mary watched through the crack in the door as Elvis crawled to his phone and dialed Lisa Marie's number. She heard him leave that final message: "Daddy loves you, baby girl. Daddy loves you so much, sweet dreams." Then she watched him crawl toward his bathroom. And she still didn't intervene. "I kept thinking he'd be embarrassed if he knew I saw him like that," Mary said, tears evident in her voice even 46 years later. "I kept thinking he'd get mad at me for not respecting his privacy, so I went back to my room and waited for the next hour check." Mary Jenkins never made that 5 a.m. check. When she finally went to Elvis's room at 6 a.m., she found him on his bathroom floor, lifeless. She'd spent 2 hours respecting the privacy of a dead man. But Mary's confession revealed something even more heartbreaking. Lisa Marie had been right about her nightmare. At exactly 4:35 a.m., 4 minutes after Elvis called her room, 8-year-old Lisa Marie had woken up again. She'd heard something, a sound from down the hall that made her little heart race. She'd gotten out of bed and walked to her doorway, looking toward her daddy's room. "Is someone there?" she'd called out in her small voice. Mary Jenkins heard her. Mary could have said, "Yes, honey, go check on your daddy." Mary could have walked Lisa Marie down that hall, could have had her knock on Elvis's door, could have created the intervention that would have saved his life. Instead, Mary whispered back, "Go back to sleep, baby, everything's fine." Lisa Marie, trusting the adults in her world, went back to bed. Mary Jenkins sent that little girl back to sleep instead of to her dying father. "That's what I can't forgive myself for," Mary said in her final confession. "Not that I didn't help Mr. Elvis directly, I was just the help and he was a proud man, but that I didn't help that baby help her daddy. She was right there, she was awake, she was asking if someone needed help. And I told her to go back to sleep." Mary Jenkins died 3 days after making that recording, taking with her the knowledge that 3 different people could have saved Elvis Presley that night. Red West could have answered his phone, Lisa Marie could have knocked on her daddy's door, and Mary Jenkins could have told the truth instead of protecting a dead man's privacy. But the story doesn't end there. Because in 2024, when Lisa Marie Presley's own possessions were being cataloged after her death, investigators found something that changed the entire narrative one final time. Hidden in Lisa Marie's jewelry box was a cassette tape, unlabeled, undated. When they played it, they heard 8-year-old Lisa Marie's voice, recorded on a little tape recorder she'd gotten for Christmas in 1976. She'd made the recording on August 17, 1977, the day after her father died. In it, she talks about her nightmare, about hearing her daddy on the phone, about walking to her doorway and asking if someone was there. But then she says something that no one knew, something that would have changed everything if anyone had thought to ask an 8-year-old girl what she really heard that night. "I heard Daddy fall down," Lisa Marie's little voice says on the tape. "I heard him say, 'Help me,' real quiet, but Miss Mary said everything was fine, so I went back to bed. But I don't think everything was fine. I think Daddy needed help and nobody came." Lisa Marie Presley had heard her father's final plea for help. And she'd been told by the only adult awake that everything was fine. For 46 years, Lisa Marie blamed herself for not saving her father. She never knew that she'd tried to save him, that her instincts had been right, that the adult she trusted had made the wrong choice. She died in 2023, still carrying guilt that was never hers to carry. Elvis Presley died trying to come home to the people he loved. Red West died wishing he'd answered 17 phone calls. Mary Jenkins died knowing she'd silenced the one person who could have saved him. And Lisa Marie Presley died never knowing that her 8-year-old heart had been right all along. Sometimes the people we trust to protect us are the ones who fail us most. Sometimes the help we need is standing right outside our door, waiting for permission to enter. And sometimes love isn't enough to overcome pride, privacy, and the terrible weight of good intentions gone wrong. Elvis spent his final hours reaching out to everyone who mattered, trying to find his way back to connection, back to family, back to the people who knew him before he became the king. He almost made it. Almost. Every family has moments like this. Calls that don't get answered, help that doesn't get offered, children who sense something's wrong but get told everything's fine. Elvis reached out 17 times that night, and 17 times pride won over love. What calls in your own life are you not answering? What cries for help are you missing because you're protecting your own heart? Love is always knocking. The question is, are we brave enough to open the door? Tell me about a time when you almost answered but didn't. I read every word, and your story matters.